Before proceeding, please make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for upcoming videos. In this video, we will look at the development of the palate and tongue. Let's begin with the development of the palate. The development of the palate starts at the 8th week of intrauterine life. In the previous video on the development of the face, we said that the fusion between the two medial nasal processes along with the frontonasal prominence gives rise to the middle portion of the nose, the philtrum, the upper lip, and the primary palate. Let's now remove the mandible and have a frontal view of the primary palate. Here will be the location of the primary palate, the eyes, and the maxillary processes. The primary palate contributes to a very small part of the palate proper, and it will accommodate the tooth buds of the incisors only. It's called primary just to differentiate it from the secondary palate, which we will discuss now. The development of the secondary palate begins with the formation of 3 outgrowths into the oral cavity. A single outgrowth, which extends from the frontonasal process into the oral cavity, called the nasal septum, and paired outgrowths that extends from the inferior medial edges of the maxillary processes on both sides. These processes are called the palatine shelves. Initially, the palatine shelves are directed medially and downwards on each side of the tongue. And this downward growth occurs due to the fact that the head at this point is folded on the developing thoracic region, which makes the tongue to occupy an elevated position, resulting in the downward growth of the palatine shelves. And it can be observed only on a frontal section through head of the embryo. As the embryo enters into its 9th week, the facial complex is lifted away from the thoracic region, and this permits the tongue to locate just below the palatine shelves. Eventually, the two palatine shelves fuses with each other at the intermaxillary suture and with the primary palate at the premaxillary suture, resulting in the formation of nasal cavity and oral cavity proper. Let's now move on to the development of the tongue. Please do watch my previous video on pharyngeal arch system and its derivatives so that this topic becomes even digestible to you. The development of the tongue begins at 4th week of gestation, from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th pharyngeal arches. But the strange thing is that these pharyngeal arches will contribute to the formation of mucous membranes of the tongue only, and not the tongue musculature. The muscles of the tongue has a completely different origin. They are formed from the occipital somites. Now, let's see what these occipital somites are. If we remind ourselves of the 3 embryonic germ layers, which were the ectoderm, mesoderm, and the endoderm, the neural tube lying in between the ectoderm and endoderm and lateral to the neural tube lies the mesoderm. Based on the location of mesodermic germ layer, it's divided into 3 parts, which are the paraxial mesoderm, the intermediate mesoderm, and the lateral plate mesoderm. The somites are actually derived from this paraxial mesoderm, which are present as pairs on lateral sides of the neural tube. The somites partially segments cranially to form the somatomeres and fully segments caudally to form somites. The first in the series are called the occipital somites, and these occipital somites will give rise to the muscles of the tongue. Now let's look at the formation of the mucous membrane of the tongue from the pharyngeal arches. The development of the mucosa of the tongue begins by the formation of local proliferation of mesenchyme that gives rise to a number of swellings in the floor of the mouth. The floor of the mouth is the area where the pharyngeal arches on both sides meet in the midline. A medial swelling called the tuberculum impar arises in the midline of the first pharyngeal arch. This median swelling is flanked by 2 other lateral swellings which also arises from the first arch. These lateral swellings soon enlarges and fuses with each other and with the tuberculum impar to form the mucous membrane of the anterior 2/3 or body of the tongue. And as the anterior 2/3 of the tongue is formed from the swellings derived from the first arch, it will be innervated by the nerve of the first arch, which is the trigeminal nerve. Just posterior to these swellings, a small midline depression develops called the foramen cecum, and this is the point from which the thyroid diverticulum descends in the embryo, and this diverticulum will become the future thyroid gland. The swelling formed from the mesenchyme of the second arch is called the copula. The 3rd and 4th arch together will form another large swelling called the hypobranchial eminence. The hypobranchial eminence contains 2 parts, namely the anterior or the cranial part derived from the 3rd arch and the caudal or the posterior part derived from the 4th arch. This hypobranchial eminence will overgrow the copula, and only its anterior part, which was derived from the third arch, takes part in the formation of the mucous membrane of the root of the tongue. And as we know that the nerve supply of the third arch is the glossopharyngeal nerve, so this makes sense that the nerve supply of the root of the tongue will be the glossopharyngeal nerve. Two other swellings develops at the posterior part of the fourth arch, which are the epiglottal swelling and the arytenoid swellings. If you think this video was helpful, please like, subscribe, share and comment if you have any questions. Thank you for watching.